I've been thinking a lot about relationships lately, especially romantic ones, because that's where this whole conversation about de-romanticization becomes most obvious. But it's impossible to ignore how much the broader cultural atmosphere around us influences how we love. And every time I sit with these thoughts, I end up returning to Bauman's idea of liquid relationships, where nothing is stable, nothing is built to last, and everything is treated as replaceable. He originally used this concept to talk about modern social ties in general, but when I look around, it's clear that the place where this liquid condition hits hardest is in romance. Dating today feels like moving through a world where everything dissolves before it even has the chance to take shape. People drift in and out of each other's lives, connections form quickly and vanish even quicker, and the emotional instability of it all has somehow become normal. And as I observed this, I realized something that has been bothering me quietly for years. We entered a state of de-romancing, a cultural moment where the dreamlike, idealistic, gentle side of love has been pushed aside in favor of something more cynical, detached, and realistic. I'm not saying realism is bad. Actually, art that portrays the messy, complicated sides of love has its own power and value, but it seems like we've gone so far into this hyper-realistic view that we lost the balance. There was a time when movies, songs, poetry, and even everyday conversations celebrated romance with sincerity, with a kind of innocence that invited people to believe in something bigger than themselves. Today, the dominant tone feels different. More music about disappointment than devotion, more films about breakups than commitment, more stories about independence than partnership. Even on social media, there's a pride in detachment, people advocating for staying alone, rejecting monogamy, or treating open relationships like the new normal, as if exclusivity or choosing one person were outdated ideas. And while some of these perspectives come from genuine personal experiences, I can't help but feel that we, as a society, are losing our tolerance for vulnerability. We treat romantic connection like a risky investment that has to be managed, controlled, or avoided when love has always required surrender, presence, and patience. The result is that most relationships today float on the surface. They come intensely but briefly, fueled by momentary attraction rather than real emotional depth. And people suffer because they mistake volatility for freedom. That's why I decided to make this video, because I think we suffer more than we should in romance, not due to love itself, but because we've reshaped love into something fragile and temporary, something liquid, and in doing so, we've forgotten how powerful, real, grounded, committed romance can be. Sometimes I feel like one of the biggest problems in modern romance is that we quietly learned to expect that nothing will last, and because of that, we stopped giving love the chance to become anything real. It's almost ironic. People say they want something deep, meaningful, transformative, but at the same time they approach relationships with this underlying belief that everything is temporary, everyone is replaceable, and emotional stability is almost unrealistic. And this mindset isn't born out of nowhere. It's a symptom of the liquid world we live in. We were trained in a way to keep moving, to not get too attached, to always assume there's someone better just to swipe away. And when you grow up in that context, of course, commitment starts to look like a burden, vulnerability starts to look dangerous, and intimacy begins to feel like something you have to protect yourself from. What breaks my heart is how normalized this became. People enter relationships already anticipating the end, already preparing their exit strategies, already keeping emotional distance so they won't lose themselves. But the truth is that love has always required a part of yourself. It demands time, effort, presence, softness, and a willingness to choose someone more than once. Instead of seeing that as something beautiful, many see it as a threat to their independence or identity, as if caring deeply for someone automatically means losing who they are. And because of this fear, relationships today often turn into short-lived emotional experiences that never reach their full potential. People meet, connect, enjoy the moment, but they don't stay long enough to see what love could become. The beginnings are passionate, the endings are abrupt, and everything in between feels like a negotiation rather than a shared journey. This pattern teaches us to believe that romance is unstable by nature, when in reality the instability comes from the way we approach it. We enter with hesitation instead of commitment, with caution instead of trust, with doubt instead of hope, and we wonder why nothing feels solid. We got used to love that doesn't last, and because of that, we stopped putting in the effort that lasting love requires. And maybe that's the first wound in today's romantic landscape. We are craving something permanent while living in a mindset that only sustains the temporary. Another thing I keep noticing is how modern culture, almost unintentionally, taught us to fear intimacy. And this fear shows up in the way people approach love today. It's strange because deep down, most of us want closeness. We want someone who understands us, who stays, who chooses us, who sees us fully. But the moment a relationship starts demanding emotional openness, real openness, not this superficial version of connection that lasts a few weeks, people panic. It's like we were conditioned to believe that letting someone get close is the same as handing them the power to hurt us. And part of this comes from the narratives we've been consuming for years. In music, films, and online spaces, love is often portrayed as something dangerous, complicated, manipulative, or oppressive. You rarely see stories that show love as a force that supports, heals, and strengthens. Instead, we see heartbreak after heartbreak, betrayal after betrayal, and we start internalizing the idea that this is how love works. Even the language people use today reveals this shift. I constantly hear things like, relationships drain me, love distracts me from my goals, or I don't want to depend on anyone, as if needing someone were a flaw, as if affection somehow weakens your self-respect. But dependency, when healthy, has always been part of love. Humans are wired for connection, and denying that doesn't make us stronger, just more isolated. The saddest part is how this fear of intimacy creates a defensive attitude in relationships. People keep emotional distance, avoid vulnerability, and treat affection like a liability instead of a gift. They hide their expectations so they won't be disappointed, they suppress their feelings so they won't be judged, and they act indifferent to avoid appearing too invested. And because both sides are doing this, relationships today often become a silent battle of who cares less. No one wants to be the one who loves more, no one wants to be the one who tries harder, and no one wants to risk being seen as too emotional. So instead of experiencing love as a deep bond, people experience it as a performance, always rehearsing the role of someone who is detached, independent, and unaffected. But intimacy has never worked like that. It requires closeness, transparency, and the courage to show the parts of ourselves we usually keep hidden. And without that courage, modern romance becomes shallow, cyclical, and fragile. We end up suffering not because love is too intense, but because we're too afraid to let it actually happen. Something else that keeps coming to my mind is how romance stopped being something people aspired to, and this shift changed the entire emotional landscape of how we relate to one another. There was a time when wanting a deep, committed relationship was seen as a natural desire, almost a universal dream, something people were proud of and openly admitted, wanting to build a life with someone, wanting to be chosen, wanting to love and be loved. Today, expressing that same desire makes some people feel embarrassed, as if longing for romance signals weakness, naivety, or a lack of ambition. And this cultural shift didn't happen by accident. It grew out of a generation raised on stories where love is either too idealized to be real or too broken to be trusted. We lost the middle ground, the human ground, the real but beautiful ground. And because of that, romance itself is no longer portrayed as meaningful. It's portrayed as a risk, a distraction, or even a limitation. Everywhere you look, there's content telling you to stay focused on yourself, to avoid emotional attachment, to keep your options open, to never rely on anyone, to treat relationships as a temporary addition to your personal journey rather than a central part of it. While there's some truth in prioritizing self-growth, this extreme individualism has quietly made people believe that love and personal evolution are incompatible, as if you can only grow alone. but that's simply not how humans are designed. We grow with people, through people, because of people. And what troubles me is how the cultural narrative has replaced hopeful romance with a kind of skeptical realism that discourages the belief that love can actually be good. When films and songs do talk about romance today, it's usually through a lens of irony, disillusionment, or emotional detachment. The innocence that once made love feel sacred has been replaced by a constant awareness of flaws, traumas, and worst-case scenarios. And while realism can be powerful, this cultural overcorrection makes an entire generation terrified of dreaming. The result is a world where the idea of a meaningful, long-term romantic bond feels outdated, like a relic from another time. People don't talk about soulmates anymore, they talk about situationships. They don't talk about commitment, they talk about seeing how it goes. They don't dream about being chosen. They hope they won't be ghosted. And because the dream of romance stopped being aspirational, people don't nurture it, don't fight for it, and don't give it enough time to grow into something real. We suffer because we were taught to expect less from love, and in expecting less, we receive exactly that. Another thing I can't ignore is how the modern obsession with realism in art and culture quietly reshaped the way we understand love, often in ways we don't even notice. I completely understand the appeal. Realism exposes the truth, the imperfections, the conflicts, the raw human parts of relationships that used to be hidden under idealized fairy tales. But somewhere along the way, we let this realistic approach dominate everything, and because of that, the softer, hopeful, dreamy side of romance almost disappeared from the cultural imagination. When you look at older songs and movies, there was a sense of innocence in the way love was portrayed, not in a childish sense, but in a sincere, unfiltered, almost poetic way. Love was a force people aspired to experience, something that elevated life rather than interrupted it. But today, romantic stories rarely give us that feeling. Everything needs to be grounded, gritty, cynical, or socially analytical. Films revolve around trauma, incompatibility, betrayal, emotional unavailability, or the painful acceptance that love isn't enough. Music focuses on detachment, independence, heartbreak, and the glorification of leaving before you get hurt. And while all of these perspectives have their place, the imbalance they've created is undeniable. It's like the cultural world became embarrassed of romance, as if dreaming of devotion, loyalty, or emotional surrender was a sign of being outdated or unrealistic. This shift shapes us more than we realize. When you grow up surrounded by stories that highlight the failures and fragilities of love, you internalize the idea that real romance can't truly exist, or that if it does, it's rare and almost mythical. Instead of inspiring people to love better, modern narratives often make them approach relationships with caution, suspicion, and a built-in expectation of disappointment. And because of this, many relationships today never get the chance to deepen. People keep emotional distance because that's what realism taught them is safest. The tragedy is that realism and romance never needed to be enemies. They can coexist. Love can be imperfect and still beautiful, difficult and still worth it, challenging and still transformative. But because our culture increasingly avoids portraying romance as something hopeful, we lose the imagination required to believe in it. We suffer because our generation forgot how to dream in love, and without the dream, we have nothing meaningful to build. Something I keep thinking about is how easily people today treat romantic partners as options rather than commitments, and how this mindset affects our ability to build anything meaningful. It's not even always intentional. It's more like a quiet habit that formed over years of living in a world that constantly floods us with alternatives. Apps, social media, endless exposure to new faces, new possibilities, new attractions. All of this created a kind of emotional marketplace where the idea of choosing one person feels almost counterintuitive. And because of this, people hesitate more, invest less, and leave faster. They hold on to this illusion that something better is always one swipe away, and in doing so, they sabotage what they already have. You can see it in the way many relationships today unfold. Two people meet, feel something real, But instead of nurturing that connection, one or both start looking over their shoulder, afraid of settling, afraid of missing out, afraid of making the wrong choice. But no one talks about how this constant search for the ideal partner makes it impossible to truly connect with anyone. Real intimacy requires time, presence, and the patience to know someone deeply. And none of these things can happen if your attention is always divided. What's even worse is how normalized this emotional disposability has become. People ghost each other without hesitation, move on without closure, and treat relationships as temporary experiences rather than opportunities to build something meaningful. And this isn't just emotionally harmful, it's spiritually exhausting. When you treat people like options, you also start treating yourself the same way, as if no one would choose you fully, as if you're also replaceable. This mindset erodes self-worth while pretending to protect it. The truth is that love only becomes real when people decide to stop running, stop comparing, and stop searching for something theoretically better. Commitment isn't about limiting your choices. It's about recognizing value when it's in front of you. But today's culture romanticizes freedom over loyalty, desire over discipline, potential over presence. And because of that, relationships rarely reach the stage where they become truly meaningful. We suffer because we've accepted the idea that people are disposable, and by believing that, we make love itself disposable too. So after thinking about how romance still matters in a world that often tries to make it feel unnecessary, and before anything else, I want to make something clear. I don't believe anyone needs a relationship to become complete, mature, or fulfilled. People grow alone all the time. People evolve through solitude, through self-discovery, through independence. I've seen it, I've lived it, and I deeply respect it. But even acknowledging that, there's still something undeniably meaningful about allowing ourselves to love, not because it fixes us or completes us, but because it adds a layer of experience that solitude, for all its power, simply can't replicate. Romance doesn't exist to fill a void. It exists to create a dimension of life where connection, affection, and vulnerability can coexist with strength, individuality, and autonomy. And this is exactly why the current wave of desromantization worries me. It makes people believe that avoiding love is the smartest path, that distance is safer, that emotional neutrality is more mature than emotional involvement. But life doesn't work like that. Everything meaningful carries risk. You can build your career alone, you can shape your personality alone, you can find direction alone, but once you decide to step into love, whether you like it or not, you will be risking something. And that's not a problem. That's part of the beauty. Maturity isn't about expecting perfection from relationships. It's about understanding that disappointment is possible and choosing to try anyway. Not blindly, not desperately, but consciously, with awareness of what you're allowing into your life. That kind of love is not naive, it's courageous. The truth is that modern relationships feel unstable, not because people are incapable of commitment, but because the culture surrounding them insists on a kind of emotional caution that suffocates romance before it even has a chance to grow. We've turned vulnerability into a weakness and sincerity into something embarrassing. We've made it common to pretend we don't care, to hide our feelings, to approach connection like a business transaction, rather than an emotional experience. And all of this contributes to a bigger problem. People stop letting themselves fall in love, not because they don't want it, but because they're afraid of how exposed it makes them. But love isn't meant to be approached with fear. Love requires openness. It requires letting someone matter. It requires accepting uncertainty, and no amount of realism or cultural cynicism will ever change that. That's why I believe romance needs to be defended, even if it sounds old-fashioned. We can appreciate realism in art, we can critique unhealthy patterns in relationships, we can acknowledge that idealization has its limits, all of that is valid. But at the same time, we shouldn't let the dreamlike, poetic, warm side of love disappear. We shouldn't accept a world where affection is mocked, where devotion is treated like weakness, where wanting to commit is seen as foolish. Romance brings color back into life. It gives us emotional texture. It reminds us that love isn't just about logic. It's also about feeling something intensely and allowing that feeling to guide us for a moment. There's nothing immature about that. There's something deeply human about it. So even after talking about desromantization, liquid relationships, and the cultural shift that has made love feel more disposable, I don't think this is the end of romance. It's not irreversible. It's not a permanent truth. It's a tendency. And tendencies can be challenged. The best way to challenge it is not through theory, but through practice. By letting ourselves love with clarity, by choosing romance consciously, by embracing the vulnerability that comes with caring deeply for someone. We don't need to go back to unrealistic fairy tales, but we also don't need to live in emotional deserts. The middle ground exists, and it's where real, mature love grows. Ultimately, loving someone will always involve risk. You might get hurt, you might be disappointed, you might lose someone you once imagined a future with, but that doesn't mean romance isn't worth it. It means you're alive. Life has always been built on risks. The risk of trying, the risk of hoping, the risk of trusting. And love is one of the few risks that can genuinely make life feel larger, richer, and more meaningful. So don't let fear decide for you. Don't let the coldness of the world convince you to stay guarded forever. Choose love when it appears. Choose romance when it feels right. Choose connection even when it scares you. Not because you need it to survive, but because you deserve to experience everything that makes life more than just a sequence of days. Romance isn't outdated. Romance isn't naive. Romance isn't weak. Romance is what happens when courage finally meets affection.